Hello and welcome to Unwatchables, the podcast for the films you might love, but you can't take around polite company. I am Marc Dottavio.
And I'm Seth Troyer.
And today we are joined once again by film critic Mike D'Angelo for one of the more obscure and flat-out surprising movies we've tackled yet. We'll talk about why that might be, what inspired Mike to pick it, and if this is the first rom-com to revolve around an act of bestiality. The film is Bobcat Goldthwait's 2006 dark comedy, Sleeping Dogs Lie. Woof.
Bark, bark.
All right. Now that silliness is over, again, I am honored to introduce Mike D'Angelo. He is one of the very first online film critics whose work has appeared in the AV Club, The Dissolve, Las Vegas Weekly, Nerve, Entertainment Weekly, Time Out New York, Esquire, Alternate Ending, among others, and his personal site, The Man Who Viewed Too Much. These days, he is writing directly for you on his Patreon page. For as little as $1 a month, you can get exclusive reviews going back a few years now. And depending on what tier you choose, you can vote on and even enter films into a weekly poll, which he then has to watch and review. So Mike is now at your bidding as well as ours for the next hour. Mike, we are thrilled to have you back.
Happy to be here. And I got to say, given the nature of your podcast, surprisingly enough, I think we might have talked about this the first time, I forget, but I had anticipated that the whole requesting aspect would be much more in the Unwatchables vein than it has turned out to be. For the most part, people have been very good about requesting actually good films for me to watch and not terrible films that they're inflicting upon me. There have been a couple of those. They made me watch Freddy. Was that you? Did you make me watch Freddy Got Fingered Again?
Okay, so I did nominate it.
Okay.
I nominated it, but it never won. And you actually, I think, ended up just getting around to it because the 20-year mark had passed or something.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So I did try, though. And I think it was an excellent piece of writing. I was very
Thank you.
Happy to see what you thought about it.
I went at great length about my reasons for not liking it much. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think actually one of your favorite lines I think that I've ever read came out of that review when you called Tom Green a one-shit wonder. So
He also gives elephants hand
Yeah.
jobs, though. You know, that's another shit. That's at least 2 or 3 shit.
Oh, well, that's actually kind of something it has in common with this movie, slightly.
a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
But tonally, they're very far apart, which is what matters to me. So,
Yeah, thank God. So, but yeah, we did talk about Freddy Got Fingered on one of our first episodes, and the last time we had you on was to talk about Irreversible,
right.
which you had a very interesting kind of personal story about people storming out of the theater en masse during that, and I'm curious to hear if there's anything about this particular movie that got a similar reaction, but...
Not that I recall. I mean, I saw this at the first time I saw it was at Sundance in 2006. I don't have any particularly strong memories of that screening, so I'm going to say it was not marked by people leaving in disgust or anything. I think,
so unlike most of the characters in the movie, they accept.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't. My memory is that the critical reaction was at best mixed, and I was very much on the higher end of that. But I do not remember people leaving, so I don't think that happened. But I couldn't swear to it.
Well, and this is one of those where if you make it through the first scene, then you can probably handle the rest.
Right. And also, most people who were seeing it, like I tend to go into at film festivals, I try to know as little as possible about films in advance when I can, but most people don't operate that way. So most people who were sitting down to see that film, which had a different title at the time, it was called Stay.
Whoa.
Which is, I think, a better title. Sleeping Dogs Lie is not bad, but Stay has a cute, double meaning. It's a command to a dog and a plea to a loved one. And the reason I was curious, I was like, why did they change it again? I was like, there must have been another movie called Stay around that time. So I looked it up and there was, but it's really bizarre. I completely you would think you would remember this movie when I tell you who is involved in it. It was directed by Marc Forster of, Finding Neverland and Monsters Ball and other notable, if not necessarily good, films. It was written by David Benioff of 25th
Oh.
Hour and Game of Thrones, and it
Mhm.
starred,
Oh.
get this, it starred Ewan McGregor, Naomi Watts, and Ryan Gosling.
You know what? I think I know what movie you're talking about too. I never saw it, but I can
didn't
picture
either.
I could picture the poster or
Yeah,
the VHS tape in the video store sitting there.
I had completely forgotten about this movie's existence, like completely, to the point where I was staring at the IMDb entry going, this is real?
Yeah.
But that had to have been the reason why they changed the title, I would think.
Whoa.
But there are some other movies called Sleeping Dogs Lie, although one was
Probably.
afterwards, I guess. So
But
Yeah,
it has
I
to
mean,
be, yeah.
yeah, it's an obvious. There are only so many titles, really.
yeah, for sure. And it is kind of funny to think about somebody looking for some other Sleeping Dogs Lie and they start watching this.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
I was just gonna say my only objection is like I'm annoyed about the killer because if the other movie is too famous, like if John Woo has made a really well-known movie called The Killer, then find another title, in my opinion. But
Mhm.
that's
sure.
just me.
Yeah, no,
Not
it's
that
it's hard to Google. But cool. Maybe I'll ask you a little bit about that later on. But
Okay.
so yeah, let's talk about Bobcat Goldthwait. I guess if you're a child of the '80s, I would imagine that you would know him from the Police Academy films or just this general stand-up character that he had. I
I
imagine
recognize
that
that
was
voice, that weird
Yeah.
voice he does, but I didn't know anything else. Yeah.
yeah.
I have actually
That was
believe
good.
it- Thank you. I owned his first album on vinyl. I'm that old. It was called Meat Bob, MEAT. And the cover showed him
Okay.
surrounded by slabs of meat or something like that.
Okay.
Hilarious.
I never saw still have not to this day seen any of the Police Academy movies. It was just not my style of comedy. But I did somewhere in my teens, I caught him doing a stand-up act on probably Letterman or somewhere like that, and thought he was hilarious. So I was very into him as a stand-up. He only really kind of did one thing, but it was distinctive and attention grabbing. And then he made a film that I still have never seen and almost watched before we did this recording, Shakes the Clown. Because I was like, well, if we're going to talk about Sleeping Dogs Lie, maybe now is the time for me to finally sit down and watch Shakes the Clown. But then I looked on Letterboxd, and there were like 8 of my friends who have seen it, and none of them liked it. It was all like 2.5 and lower ratings, and I was like, I don't know, maybe not. So I never got to it.
That's kind of turned me off a little bit too, because that is one that I've heard about. It's definitely kind of a cult movie now, and he's had this. He's pretty much like he doesn't do the comedian thing. I mean, I think he is still, I guess, a comedian, but he doesn't do that character anymore. And he's, I think, way better known now for like fully transitioned into filmmaking.
Yeah, and he shoots a lot of. I believe he is very heavily directing other comedians' stand-up specials. I think that's kind of his specialty now.
Right. So it's one of the more, whatever you think of his movies, it is one of the more successful like transitions into actually becoming a behind the camera filmmaker.
Well, yes and no. We're going to talk about the filmmaking in this.
Oh yeah,
in this film.
Well, as far as what he spends his time doing,
yeah.
So
I don't know how successful we can really say it was, but I would like to believe that he has picked up some fundamentals since he made this film.
Right. And he's had some strange things, like he did a Bigfoot found footage horror movie called Willow Creek.
Yes, I watched a little bit of that, and it did not appeal to me. I think I watched the first 10 minutes. As you may know, I watched the first 10 minutes of many, many films just to see if they might grab me, and that one did not. But his career has been interesting. I'm always, anytime I hear that he's done something, I perk up a little bit. I may not actually end up seeing it, but I'm interested.
Yeah, and I feel like his most well-known movie is probably World's Greatest Dad from 2009, which because at least because it has Robin Williams in the starring role.
Right.
And I feel like that got a lot of critical praise when it came out too, even though that's one of the few I have seen by him, and I was a little lukewarm on it. But
Yeah, me too.
It
uh,
was like billed as like a Robin Williams like comeback to some sort of dramatic place or something. I feel like,
Yeah.
right, and it has the
but I
whole
don't think
like
it was.
Dear Evan Hansen plot, basically, of like a teenager who commits suicide. Then he constructs this whole narrative around him being a great person, and
Right.
yeah, it was ambitious, I guess, and it definitely shows that he has more in his mind than just making straight ahead comedies, which I think is in this film's favor too.
Right.
Um, but yeah, let's talk about Sleeping Dogs Lie then, slash Stay, or whatever you want to call it.
I would like to request doing something slightly, well, I'm guessing
Sure.
slightly unorthodox, which is before I talk about why I chose this particular film, I would like to hear what you guys thought of it, just briefly. I'm really curious.
Cool. All right. So I guess, well, I don't. Do you want to start, Seth?
I could start. I don't care.
Go ahead.
I was like pleasantly surprised, and I think that's like that is just a thing about it. I wonder what a second viewing would be like, because it is just so like the ride of it is just you don't know where it's all going, and how a movie based around this woman sucking dog cock. I'm wondering how many times we say dog cock in this podcast.
It's probably going to be a lot.
It's gonna be a lot, but I'm gonna say it again.
There's
I'm
Dog-
budgeting you, Seth. You've got 4 left.
There's no way to avoid it, quite frankly.
No. And yeah, you're just like that is the opening of the movie, is her in college and doing this thing that, you know, could understandably make people turn off the whole movie. I don't know. I was actually like impressed at how much of this like kind of threw me for a loop, like even in a dramatic sense. Like I love like following the more just basic soap opera beats of everything, of like
Right.
there's like the first movie, which you think is going to be the whole thing with like the boyfriend and the mom and everything, and that's going to be the whole movie, and that's only just like half of it. Then they like she breaks up with the boyfriend because he breaks up with her basically because finds out about the dog cock and everything, and then her life goes on in like this very like, not, I don't want to say like capital R realism or something, but I was impressed at how it goes on to like now she has another boyfriend and she has new problems, and there's this funeral she's got to go to, blah blah blah. Right. I don't know. I just like I found it really like the dog cock was a good jump off point for a surprisingly good like little, I don't know, like a cute little soap opera thing about lying, or maybe we should lie. I don't know how I feel about the ultimate like moral of it, because I mean I do land on just like don't give her such a hard time for sucking dog cock in college.
You're down to one more use.
But I feel like the movie is almost like I don't know, it's both like praising her and giving her like kudos for being honest about herself, and also just being like, shut up, please don't tell us about the dog cock. That's it. I'm not a dog cock.
You're out. So the way this movie starts out to me almost seems like a creative writing assignment, that your first scene has to be that somebody not quite seeing but describing about how they gave a dog oral sex, and then see if then you have to make a rest of the movie that's still funny but actually takes it seriously and is sensitive and insightful and maybe even moving at the end. And I think that he mostly pulls that off, and I did find it funny, and I did find it a little bit profound in terms of the unconventionality of the themes and the message kind of where it ends up. So I really like this movie.
Oh, good. The reason that I asked you guys to go first is because I had not seen it since I watched it twice in 2006. I saw it at Sundance, and then I saw it again about 6 months later, I assume It says press screening in my tag, so I assume it was right before it was released. Because I reviewed it, I think, for somebody. And then I had not seen it since. So I watched it last night, and about 20 minutes into it, I was like, these guys must think I'm insane.
No.
And it was not because I was watching this going, oh my God, this movie sucks, but it's so, and we'll talk about this, it's so mediocre to bad as a cinematic object
Yes.
that I was like, are they going to be able to look past that and get to where it actually gets really interesting? And I'm glad to hear that you did, because it's rough sledding for a while. And
Yeah.
the things that make it rough sledding never go away. They just get sort of overridden to some degree. But
yeah,
I
it
think you
feels
have to-
and looks like, I don't know, borderline student film, or like very like low budget kind of filmmaking. I don't know how to characterize it exactly, like the cameras or how it looks. Something about it does not like immediately hits even like a viewer who doesn't know anything about that as not Hollywood, like not a Hollywood look, right?
That's what I was thinking. Like I warned Marc, I think, that it was going to look terrible, and I was thinking that I was thinking in terms of early DV cameras and the image, capture quality.
Well, that's what I was wondering, if maybe that's what it was.
It's maybe partly that. It's not as terrible in that respect as I remembered, because the really terrible cameras were about 4 years earlier. Like DV films shot in 2002 are almost unwatchable. This one's bad. You can tell it's from that era, but it's not that bad. It's more the compositions are mostly kind of awkward and terrible. But I was thinking of my father, because my father's not a cinephile at all. So I was like, if I were watching this with my dad and I were saying like, oh my God, the compositions are so bad, my dad would pick up the remote and pause it and go, explain to me why that's bad. Because that's just the kind of guy he is. And I was realizing I would have trouble articulating what it is, because I don't really have the technical knowledge. Like my assumption is that it's some combination of it's a poor combination of lens choice and camera placement is my guess. But I couldn't say that with any confidence. So what I did was I looked up, I was curious, like, who was the DP on this movie? So I looked it up, and it was a guy named Ian S. Takahashi. So I checked to see what he had done. This was the first film he was ever the cinematographer for. He had almost no credits of any kind prior to this. So he does have he's still working to this day. And I was going through and I was like, wow, he has a lot of really impressive credits. He worked on Under the Silver Lake. He worked on Us. He worked on the Neon Demon. But then I looked closer and I was like,
gig. Wow.
He was not the DP on any of those films.
Oh, okay.
So I looked to see what he actually did. His credit for Under the Silver Lake is underwater DP.
Oh.
His credit for us is underwater DP. His credit for the Neon Demon is camera operator underwater.
No way.
Yes. So, and I don't know if you guys noticed this about Sleeping Dogs Lie.
The whole movie takes place underwater?
Not a lot of underwater action.
No, it is not. To
This
my
movie
knowledge,
looks-
at least.
Man, this would have looked great underwater.
I would go so far as to say none at all. So I'm happy that he has carved out a niche for himself, and I'm sure he's very good at his job. But I think this is a case of a director who did not know what he was doing, making the mistake of hiring a cinematographer who also did not know what he was doing. And that is reflected in what you see on screen.
So his main qualification since then is like he must own like a wetsuit and an oxygen tank.
I would imagine.
And
somebody is going to alert him to this podcast episode. He's going to be, this is the most anybody has ever talked about me.
We gotta get him on. We gotta get him on the show.
Oh, yeah.
But so it is a terrible looking film, and it also has, I would submit, one of the worst musical scores of any film I've ever seen. It's really
yes.
really
it's like
overbearing and awful.
It's
made
a lot
for
of
TV.
accordion, and it really made me think it sounded like this could be public domain music or something that he just
Yeah,
did, that he was
for
able to get the
sure.
rights for.
free sound or something.
And I was curious about that too, because I did see that there was a composer credit on this, which is Gerald Brunskill. And on Wikipedia, if you click on his name from the Sleeping Dogs Lie Wikipedia page, it takes you to Gerald Brunskill, Irish politician who died in 1918, which I don't think is the same guy.
I am impressed by the amount of research we all did.
Yeah.
On the crew of this movie.
I'll say
Yeah,
what I did
and,
none. So good job, guys.
It turns out there is a different Gerald Brunskill. I'm not gonna try. Who knows what the deal was with the music on this movie? But yeah, you're totally right that between that and the fades between scenes and the establishing shots, like when we were watching this, Seth said that it felt like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
I kept waiting for the music to come in.
Yeah, and it is a combination of him kind of being on like Kevin Smith's technical skill level, as well as just the way it looked. Because like you said, there's this scene early on in a dog park, I think, that I honestly was thinking, is this shot in front of a green screen?
Yeah. I mean, that's the camera. That's
and I'm thinking it's just because there's no depth of field at all. And
there's no water.
Yeah. So that is, I think that some people might dismiss this movie out of hand, like you said, starting out watching it because it looks like that. And
I honestly, I have to. So I've gone back and forth on the ratings, or my rating for this film. For those of you listeners who don't know, I stupidly rate everything on a 1 to 100 scale. So the first time I saw this at Sundance, I gave it 69. Yuck. Out of 100, which is like 3.5 letterbox stars.
I'm laughing.
And then I upgraded it the second time to 72, which is 4 stars. And now I think I'm bringing it back down because I think the second time I was like, it's technically awful, but that's not that important. And this time I was like, it really kind of gets in the way more than I would like.
See, I go back and forth. Yeah, as like a glutton for weird factor or whatever you want to call it in a movie. I can't tell. Yeah, I try and imagine like the bigger budget, well-made Hollywood version. I don't know which one. I think like it's just made even more unsettling and strange.
I have a friend
the fact that it feels like a made-for-TV movie that like has this content in it that you would never imagine to be in this setting, right?
Yeah, my friend Theo made that argument at the time, as I recall. He was like, "This movie looks terrible, and that works in its favor to some degree." And it also, it's not a technical thing, but I think similarly, Melinda Page Hamilton's performance in this film is incredible, and I also think her casting was extremely savvy in that she is about as like stereotypically girl next door as you could possibly imagine. Like if you put like Aubrey Plaza in this role, it would be a whole different movie because Aubrey Plaza is somebody where you would not be that surprised necessarily. Now, that's not a reflection on the actual Aubrey Plaza. I'm just saying the persona that she has, her screen persona, is somebody who is, somewhat dangerous and offbeat and willing to do unconventional and possibly disgusting. Yeah. And that's not this performance is not that at all. It's more like if Meg Ryan were the star of this movie kind of thing.
And I think that's interesting that you could see this as kind of a case study of how much do the formal elements matter and, what you can pull off alone with something that looks like this, but with having really good actors and a director who at least seems to know how to work with the actors to establish that tone, even if he can't really do that. And I am curious, just while we're on this topic, are there any other either directors or movies just in particular you can think of that you love that overcome that, where you're always like, God, this just not, it either looks terrible or it's so undistinguished, yet everything else is so good?
I know there are. I'm having trouble thinking of
I shouldn't have sprung it on you
off the top of my head.
Would you put Hong Sang-soo in that category just for kind of losing interest?
Yes, recent Hong Sang-soo, I think, is visually kind of terrible. That he did not start out that way. If you go back and look at his earliest films, he used to be much more sort of formally impressive. And then at some point he doesn't care now. He's just
Mm.
that became of no interest to him, and he's much more just like, let's get it shot as quickly as possible and focus on the script and the performances to the exclusion of everything else. So yes, that's a good example, and it means his recent films are like they live and die on the quality of his idea. And I can't even really say the script because they're only sort of semi-written, semi-improv. He's kind of making them up day by day as he goes along and handing them lines on the day of shooting. And so, yeah, it's mostly his idea, the conception. Or although the film of his that I love this year, which is called In Water, does have a fascinating formal conceit in that the entire film is shot out of focus deliberately.
Oh, well, good to know it's deliberate. Then.
Yes.
Okay.
like it's
Yeah,
wildly
sure.
out of focus. It's the kind of thing where it couldn't be an error. It's
Right.
So that I actually thought worked really well, and I was excited to see him get interested in. Sorry, we're turning this into a whole Hong Sang Soo podcast, but
Sure.
but that is a good example of, and there are others. I'm sure if I went and looked at my favorite films, I would find other things that are formally kind of wretched, and I just didn't care because the script and the acting and so forth is strong enough to overcome that. But
all right. Well, then I guess we've pretty well covered what the major shortcoming is for this
Right.
movie, and maybe there's more that you think. But let's talk a little bit about what works, I guess. Do you remember specifically what made your rating increase the first time that you watched this?
No, and I'm just gonna guess that I decided that the shittiness of the visuals and so forth was not as important. What I love about the film, which I guess we kind of glanced over back at the beginning, is basically just the idea that it takes this theoretically outrageous idea. So that's, I mean, if I told you, if you have any idea who Bobcat Goldthwait is, or especially was, if you knew his persona back in the 80s, and then I said, and if you had seen Shakes the Clown, which from all I can tell is everything I have heard about it is like wildly offensive in every possible way. And then I said, Bobcat Goldthwait has written and directed a movie about a woman who blew a dog. Like whatever movie you would imagine that to be, this is not that at all.
No.
It actually, it starts from that place, and then it takes that idea seriously as if it were something that had actually happened in somebody's actual life, and watches the fallout from that. Now it has to get itself into some contrived places to do that. So she's got the drug addicted brother who is hiding in the attic and overhears the conversation and then reveals it to her parents and so on and so forth. And that stuff is sort of black comedy, but I don't know that I would describe this film as a comedy overall. It really gets very dark at times, and it has one moment in particular that, like, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. Every time it happens, I'm like, ugh. Where after she tells him that she had done this, and he has a terrible reaction, and then she follows him out to another part of the house and asks him to hold her, which he cannot do. And then she tries to kiss him, and he won't kiss her back. And then she just flatly says, "I wish I were dead," and walks out of the frame. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, this is not fun at all. I thought this movie was going to be hilarious, and it has become like heart-ripping instead. And I was not prepared for that. And it doesn't stay in that mode all the time. I think it would be amazing if it did. But, but it keeps going back there. And so like at the point where you think like, oh, maybe it's been resolved, when she and her boyfriend kind of get past it and get back together, and then he fucks it up again by suddenly saying, "Hey, I want to watch you blow the dog."
Oh God, yeah,
fucking insane. And yet I believe it in the moment. They actually, the guy, I think his name is Bryce Johnson. I forget the actor's name.
Sounds right.
But and I haven't seen him in a lot of other things, although I looked him up and he was in like Oppenheimer this year in some very small part. But so he's still working. But he actually does. He doesn't have the same chops that Hamilton does, but he does a very good job. And he actually sells that moment of him having swung all the way from "this is revolting to me and I can't even look at you" to "now I'd like to watch you do it." Although even that is in part a way of like asserting dominance over her in a strange sort of way. I don't know. This whole thing is
Right.
so emotionally fucked up that it's really, it's more than the movie can
Mhm.
kind of handle in some respects, which is what I admire about it.
Yeah, I was getting nervous when he brought up the idea of her doing that to the dog again, that this was going to be like a Chasing Amy twist where he was
Right.
like, this is how we're going to fix things.
You gotta do
And
it.
luckily
We're all
it,
gonna
it doesn't
blow the
go
dog.
there. But you're so right, especially that scene where where she does reveal this, which she doesn't have to. She just kind of keeps trying to convince herself that she should be open and honest about everything. And that moment that you pointed out is definitely devastating. And I think the way the whole scene unfolds with, you know, the way she immediately folds back on it and tries to laugh about it and say I was kidding,
Right.
and he just
And
like
it does
can't
not
believe
work.
it. Yeah. It's a very, very painful scene.
Yeah, everything to do with that aspect of it, I think, is amazing. It's actually, I think it's a very good drama and a very so-so black comedy. Like the black comedy aspects, I don't think particularly work a lot of the time. And I also would say Brian Posehn has a small part in this movie, and I think he is acting like leagues above everybody else in terms of being funny. He's
Hmm.
much fun. He's much funnier, I think. I don't know. Are you familiar with Brian Posehn? I'm not sure.
Sure, yeah,
The
from
guy with the glasses.
Yes.
yeah, he's him and the Steve Agee, I think.
Oh yeah, he's
who's
the friend
also
of
in
the
this.
meth addict brother.
Yeah, they were both on the Sarah Silverman show together.
Yeah.
And yeah,
He's,
and I
he's
like
an alt comic.
yeah, exactly. And I did love when he just kind of tries to console her and is like, I kissed a dead body once.
That was great.
He's just I feel like a lot of his stuff was improvised, so he's bringing over a casserole and he's like, it moved around some in the truck, but I think it's probably
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I
it's
did
good.
laugh a lot during this. I mean, is
I
that
laughed a ton. I don't know. I was surprised at the comedy. And again, like it's having this balance of real moments, like real emotion. I think you are always sort of interrogating yourself too as an audience member of
Mhm.
like, now how would I actually react to someone telling me that I was, you know, like
Right.
what would I actually do, as much as I am like scoffing at these people maybe. I don't know. Yeah. You're always like putting yourself in the shoes of various characters and things.
And it works. I was thinking at one point about one of my favorite films of the last century, The Duke of Burgundy, which uses sort of
Yeah.
S&M relationships as essentially a metaphor for all kinds of other things that could be, you know, I generally describe that film as like it's a extreme version of like, what if your spouse wants to watch, you know, bad Hallmark, you know, Christmas movies and you don't, but you're going to do it because you love her and or him or whatever the case may be.
Right. It could be
And this,
anything.
yeah, and this is a similar sort of situation where like blowing a dog is a really extreme version of, we all have things that we have done that we would not want our loved ones to know about. Nobody wants their entire existence to be an open book for everybody. So you can kind of plug your own secret or, you know, shame into that and make it work for you emotionally, or at least I can.
Yeah, and I think it works all the better because it's such an like extreme over the top example,
Exactly.
especially when we have this transition to it being even more overtly dramatic in the last act. That if there's something that keeps it from getting kind of saccharine, it's remembering that, oh yeah, what is the thing again that they were talking about that
Right.
drove this wedge
Yeah.
into everything. And
But
that kind of juxtaposition definitely always is something that works for me better than the more conventional approach.
right. But he also gets like some more grounded stuff into it too. Like one thing that I'd completely forgotten about, which I always have liked, is that her second boyfriend, the guy she eventually ends up with, I think his name is Ed, they finally start making out and they're going to have sex, and she like pulls open his shirt and starts kissing his belly, and he's very self-conscious about it and says, don't do that, I'm fat. And like that's
Mhm.
like, I believe that's probably something that's right out of Goldthwait's own life, would be my guess. It feels very honest. And it's the same sort of emotional tenor, but completely grounded in reality rather than being like blown up into this, you know, outrageous thing that the film takes off from. So it's got both elements working sort of simultaneously all the time.
I think that's a great example of like one of many moments in this where like in the grand scheme of things, it's wild that it takes a breath to do something like that, and
Mhm.
like that doesn't necessarily like feed into the greater thesis or the big crazy joke at the center of the movie at all. Like, but it
Right.
time and time again, there's these little sweet moments like that, which
Yeah.
is just kind of impressive.
Yeah, I
I
thought
also,
the same thing about one that really caught me off guard was when the mother dies from a brain aneurysm
I
later
was
on in
just
the
about to mention
movie.
that. Yeah.
And maybe this is actually what I first thought you might have been referring to when you were talking about just a particular like line or detail. But when she finally comes to see her dad and the food is still out on the table, and he explains that it
Oh,
happened like when we were about to sit down and I can't put the food away, I was like,
Right.
oh my God.
Yeah.
yeah. There's a real dark. That's dark. It's heavy.
And there's also, I actually, I don't know. I'm of two minds about the letter that she gets from her mother at the end. It feels a little easy in some ways.
Hmm.
And I think it's never stated directly, but her anguish when she hears that her mother has died. Now, anybody would be anguished with their mother dying, but she has a reaction that to me is not just my mother is dead, but is also my mother is dead and she died still thinking I was this horrible person. And now we can never fix that.
Hmm.
And the letter at the end kind of lets her and the audience kind of off the hook for that horror. And I don't know that I'm mad about that necessarily. Like I'm not insisting that she be made to suffer with that understanding for the rest of her life. But at the same time, for the brief time that I think it's going to do that, I'm kind of goggle-eyed again. So I'm
Yeah,
impressed that it even raised that as a possibility.
I think it's a little neat, but I think it does just kind of take the central conceit of the movie, like very seriously,
Mm-hmm.
in like a suddenly very realistic way. That like the mom, your mom might have to like write a whole letter at a certain point about like addressing and finally like putting to rest the fact that you sucked a dog's cock. Um, it might
Yeah,
it,
who
it
can't
would
relate to that?
and it probably, I mean, it did read like a letter from a mom, in a
Yeah.
very realistic way, of that it doesn't get like super overblown and on a very like poetic or anything. It is just like, we all have things, and I understand that. And I kind of loved the letter, actually.
Really.
Yeah, I'm a little more on the side of it seeming like reaching a little too hard for the closure, um, or
And
all wounds being healed by the end of the movie. And I don't think that the transition is a little bit rocky into the really dramatic stuff, and maybe that just has to do also with him not having like the most confident filmmaking chops
right.
too. Uh, but in spirit, I still really like that. And the real crux of that, I think, is her deciding to not to let her dad go the rest of his life thinking that he was the only man that she ever had sex with, when we find out earlier in the movie she actually had sex with Roy Orbison,
Right.
which I think is very funny. And especially that we have this kind of sitcom situation potentially when they first come over, to meet the meth addicted brother and the hyper conservative religious parents. And then we pretty quickly get her mom kind of casually admitting to this tryst with Elvis and Roy Orbison
Right.
in a way that, I don't know, it didn't seem overly jokey to me, and it didn't end up getting something that came back in an obvious way. Like I figured there was going to be some blow up at some point, and she would be like, "Well, you fucked Roy Orbison," and and then
Right.
the dad would freak out. Uh,
Right.
Yeah.
Instead,
Oh,
it's kind of almost the point of the movie.
yeah. That's another good example, by the way, of the filmmaking issues, because when I was watching it again, I told you like early on, I was like, these guys are going to think this movie is terrible. The first part where I was just like, okay, this is starting to settle into a groove was that conversation with I think her name is Amy and her mother,
Mhm.
where she's confessing about the Elvis Presley and the Roy Orbison thing. And meanwhile, also a pretty good scene between the boyfriend and her father, and he's confessing that he hates his job, and he's chopping wood angrily and just being bitter about things. And both of those scenes are very well scripted and acted, and the way that they're cut back and forth is totally inept. Like it keeps putting the brakes on them, each one of them individually, just as they're starting to get rolling, and it kicks the legs out from under them again and again and again. And he really should have just let each one of them kind of play on its own, or at least done less of the intercutting than he did. But
yeah, that's always going to be a thing to hold this movie back, I guess. But the cast is so good. You mentioned Melinda Page Hamilton, and I thought that Jack Plotnick as the brother was also very funny. Dougie, which is definitely
playing the stupid little keyboard and doing math and stuff.
Yeah, and that in particular could really be a stock role of the fuck up, jealous, drug addicted brother, and it kind of is that, but he both makes it more like credible and just flat out like funny.
Yeah, there's nobody I don't think in the movie who's in any way bad. It's just a question of, I think Melinda Page Hamilton is operating on a higher level. It's mostly just because her character is the most, she's the most human and the least sort of cartoonish of the whole group. The parents are both sort of stock characters, and the brother's a stock character and so forth. So they're all doing good work within these very narrow confines. She actually has to take this insane situation and make it credible, and does an amazing job. I've been kind of sad that she has continued to work. She was on the show Mrs. America a few years back. She had a little role in that, but I have not seen much of her since this film, and I think that's kind of a shame.
Yeah, her filmography was surprisingly small looking through it. And then I guess a lot of it is on TV. I guess she had a really small role in Mad Men too, which I didn't really remember.
No, I don't remember that either.
So, yeah, and actually that kind of goes for a lot of the actors in this movie who I thought were really good. It just seemed like none really had big standout film roles.
Not on film. The dad was the police chief on Dexter for many years, if you watch.
There you go.
Dexter.
Okay.
But,
all right.
I mean, give it to let other actors try and navigate some of these scenes, like, and see how they do.
Yeah.
I think it is like they are kind of like unprecedented scenes and stuff, as far as like not going too far into it being just sure Freddy got fingered or something, and not going just full on like dramatic and losing the fact that it is absurdist in some level. I don't know. Yeah, it is a weird tightrope thing.
Yeah, but I mean, don't get me started on Freddy, but it's not trying to shock you primarily. No. It has a shocking, inciting incident, but that's not the goal of the movie, is to gross you out or make you uncomfortable. I mean, well, to make you uncomfortable, but emotionally uncomfortable, not like I'm going to throw up uncomfortable, even though there is a character who actually says I'm going to throw up at one point, having heard about what she did. But
look at this, establishes that so well in the beginning. Though it just gets it out of the way, and it's very quick. They don't make it this whole like sequence of events with like I don't know. I think Bob has some empathy for this character for real.
Oh, absolutely,
real empathy for this, and is on her side of it being just. We do crazy things sometimes. We just do crazy things, especially when we're young, he's fully on the side of that.
Yeah. And you make a good point earlier that I'm embarrassed to say I'd not really thought about, which is that the film comes to this conclusion that I kind of agree with ultimately, that like there are some things you don't need to be 100% honest about everything with everyone or anyone in your life. There are some things that are just yours and you can hang on to them, and it's not always beneficial to a relationship to be constantly truthful all the time. I do believe that's true. At the same time, your point is well taken that maybe just fucking relax about something that happened, however many years earlier. She can't be that old, so it's probably like 12 years earlier or whatever. But something that happened one time that she clearly regrets, and that however, disgusting you and I may find it, it's not, her second boyfriend, Ed, at one point asks her, he doesn't know what she did, but he asks her, like, did you intend to hurt anybody? And she says no. And he says, well, then I think you just made a mistake.
Right.
And that's actually a really healthy way to look at it that nobody else in the film seems able to wrap their head around for some reason.
Right. It seems like what's more important is like him trying to get these characters. It's like, okay, it's fine, like, to have someone reveal this to you. It's just you should be really prepared if you do turn to someone and ask them, like, what is the craziest thing you've ever done? And you better, and if you actually do love them, you better be prepared to, like, let that in, because it could be anything, you know.
That's just always, anytime anybody
or don't
ever
ask,
says, yeah, do you really want to know? Like, nobody has ever answered no to that question in the history of time, I don't think.
That is the deal, yeah.
Sometimes you shouldn't really want to know.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we spend what feels to me like most of the film with this first boyfriend, and they really did seem to me like they were a good match, like they were a good couple, and it's actually just this one thing that ends up making it unsalvageable, which of course, is his fault. But I do also like that we don't hear a lot of movies, that basically come out and say, like, you don't, it's not the most important thing, to be honest.
Right.
And it's just interesting that she just kind of ends up with this other guy, and we never even revisit with that boyfriend. There's no like making up or acceptance or anything. The lesson isn't him getting over it. It's her just deciding not to go there.
Yeah, I was waiting for him to be like an Adam Sandler movie style, like villain or something. By the end, he like comes back and he's gonna do something to like ruin the day or something. But he's not. He just is like, he's a boyfriend who just didn't accept it, and they broke up and they moved on, and he's not in the movie. Like, I was just waiting for him to like reappear in the third act for some reason, and like be like, he's the shitty boyfriend, just to illuminate how good the new boyfriend is. But they don't do that. Right. I thought that was kind of impressive.
Well, they do it a little bit in that they have her go pick up her stuff at their former, where she had moved out of the apartment. So that's the last time, I think that's the last time we see him, is when she goes and gets her couch or whatever. And he's just kind of a sullen asshole about it. Like, he doesn't want to help carry the couch. And he's just, it just kind of confirms that, Brian Posehn actually says, like, is she serious about that guy? Because he seems like a cock to me. and Brian Posehn was kind of right, honestly.
In the end,
yeah.
They what was the other thing I wanted to talk about with this? The very end, we get the kind of the moral is wrapped up with her deciding to let the new boyfriend think that the real secret was that she got an abortion. Right. And that he looks right at her and says, for being honest, I love you even more. And I feel like that would have been a great ending, and I could have done without the kind of closing voiceover where she kind of sums up the message of the movie. Like, I think I would have liked this a little more too if it would have ended like right before that happened, without her, just coming out and saying, it's important to lie.
Right. No, I don't need that. I don't mind the final joke about, like, no, I didn't have a dog, just cats. That's cute enough.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't mind that so much. But yeah, you could do without the voiceover. I assume he brings it back because it seems structurally sound to do that. There was a voiceover at the beginning, and then there's no voiceover through most of the film, so you're supposed to bring it back at the end. Is something he may have read in a screenwriting guide or something like that. But
right.
It's not strictly necessary, no.
But I think we keep coming back to that, though, being sort of both what we like and is kind of frustrating, because I think it is more complicated than what the voiceover sums up, right? It's not always, sometimes, I think letting that be might have been better.
Yeah. No, like I said earlier, I think the film is tapping into an emotional range that it's not entirely itself prepared to handle.
That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah. So it keeps kind of like going into places and then retreating, kind of, because it's like, it's getting a little raw here. I'm worried that the comedy part is leaking away, and it is. He's not wrong. So, like, he keeps pulling back before it turns into a really weird fucking like Ingmar Bergman movie instead of what he actually set out to make, which is a dark comedy. But that's why I
Right.
said I don't really know that I would. If somebody asked me to describe it, I don't know that I would call it a comedy. Maybe that's just because what what registers most strongly with me and what I always take away from it is not the funny parts, but the like brutally serious parts.
Do you think that that's the main difference between this and the other movies you have seen by him? Maybe it's been too long for you to totally remember, but it seems like this is the only one that you think is successful on this kind of level.
I'm certainly World's Greatest Dad is trying to do something very similar.
Mm.
I was very mixed on that film. I don't remember. I would have to go back and reread whatever I'm pretty sure I reviewed it. I don't remember why I felt like it didn't work. It might have been Robin Williams because I tend to find that Robin Williams does not work for me in any mode other than being outrageously funny. When he tries to be serious, I tend to not be impressed. But so it might have been that, or there might have been something else. I would have to go back and check. But I know that it's definitely in a similar vein. Again, I have not seen Shakes the Clown, so I could not say whether Shakes the Clown is trying to do. I never got the impression from anyone that it had anything that ambitious in mind. It really felt like it was trying to be, as it bills itself, the Citizen Kane of alcoholic clown movies. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something more going on there. And then I'm trying to remember, are there any films of his that we're forgetting apart from Willow Creek?
God Bless America was
right.
one, right?
Yeah. That was another. That was much more caustic. It's not really. That was an angry movie, to I think its detriment to a large degree. Although I liked aspects of it. That was another one I was pretty mixed on. But it was doing interesting things. I think that starred Bill Murray's brother, as I recall, Joel Murray, I think.
That sounds. I didn't realize there was a family connection
Yeah.
there, but that's basically like two people going on a murder spree, killing like reality TV stars and things that piss off
yes
people from that generation,
right? And it's very didactic in ways that are annoying, but if you are if you feel similarly about his targets as he does, there is also something cathartic about seeing a bunch of those people get blown away. So but I wouldn't call that in the same. I would say World's Greatest Dad and Sleeping Dogs Lie are the two that are most similar tonally.
Okay.
And just one of them is just better at it than the other one, I think. And I think it really may be just the difference between Melinda Page Hamilton's performance in this film versus having a big star who's very self-conscious about what he's doing, like Robin Williams, at the center of your movie.
It goes a long way. Yeah, I mean, I do think that's a great way of summing up how I feel about the movie. At certain points, I am just like amazed that it's possibly getting to the heights that it's getting to.
Yeah,
is that you're just it's so unassuming, and I mean, if anything, you're just either expecting this to somehow be just like borderline like a Hallmark movie at one point, or like it could have just gotten some yucks from some stoners with like enough like blowing a dog jokes. Like I thought it was going to go that way basically at a certain point, and yeah, you are just kind of impressed that someone could like stop giggling for 5 seconds and actually sit down and write this thing and be very serious about the idea, which I think that is kind of great, because yeah, you could really milk this, just purely milk this kind of like hook, which it is a hook. It's like a great hook.
Oh yeah.
Like it immediately gets everybody in the room thinking and looking, and like you can tell it feels like it was born out of maybe one of his stand-up routines or something. You know, it's just like a quick joke that he made, and it is another thing to make a movie out of it. I think I'm impressed by that.
Yeah, even if it's not always successful, it's still kind of thrilling to see it try to the extent that it does, I think. And the fact that John Waters, I heard, is a big fan of this film, and he picked it as his annual selection for the Maryland Film Festival in 2007.
Oh, that follows.
Yeah, but it's almost misleading because the movie doesn't. John Waters would never make a movie that would end up
Yeah.
like this. Like,
Yeah, no.
he would have ran
It's
with that.
You mean you
it's not-
didn't
it's not
see
at all
her
the same
do
sort of-
it? What's the point?
Yeah, he would make something really unwatchable, I think, out of this. But so yeah, I think it deserves to be more well known and to be reevaluated to the extent that it's been kind of overlooked. Where did you finally end up then, Mike? Did this go back down to the 3.5 star 67? Are we out of 4-star territory here?
Yeah, I
Do
think
you
I'm going
judge
to
her
have to.
harshly?
I ultimately I had so much. I spent so much of the movie last night wincing at things that were just borderline inept that I can't really consider it even a near great film, even though it is doing certain things that I find amazing. So yeah, I think I'm going to go back to my original rating, which was 69, which will So
Yeah.
now the dog is going down on her as well, apparently.
Oh yes, it is. No, I mean I could also understand that with this viewing too. Though this could be a nightmare. Like it was one thing to like just watch it with Marc for the podcast. It would be another thing to like, all right, I'm gonna go and take this and watch this with my girlfriend, and we'll
Right.
see. Or like I'm gonna pitch this to some guys who have a podcast. I could imagine being a little like anxious, like whoa, what do they think of me or something, or like I don't know.
I mean-
that could kind of mess up the actual viewing of it.
No, as I said, my only concern was that you guys were going to go like, this movie is inept. What were you thinking? So I was relieved that was not actually the case. But I probably wouldn't have thought to bring this up for your concept on my own. It was on a list of possible titles that you guys sent to me, and I was like, oh, that one, that's perfect, because I haven't seen that film in a million years.
I didn't know he had dog sucker movies. That's Marc. I had no idea.
Well,
So how did you come upon it, Marc?
actually, it was because of you.
Okay. That makes sense.
I believe that I'm not sure how I stumbled upon the letterbox page for it, but you were the only person that I followed who actually had a rating for it, and
This
was
is your
higher
karma,
than almost anyone
Mike.
else's on the page too. So I'm pretty sure I threw it in my watch list there, and then at one point it occurred to me, this sounds like something that could fit the theme of our podcast.
It does, although it's ironically, I find that the part of the film that in theory would be unwatchable is great, and there are other aspects that do in fact make it nearly unwatchable, which are all the terrible directing and cinematography.
Oh yeah, good point.
Yeah, I mean, even
So-
That way
just some
sometimes.
moments with like the cringy aspect of just putting yourself in the shoes of just going with your girlfriend to meet her parents and they suck, and it's like
Right.
that is, I don't know, for some reason that fills me with just PTSD, like some bad meet the parent moments.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the movies that we have to watch for this do feel like assignments, and Marc and Seth and I also watched Irreversible in the same room together when you were on the podcast last time, and
Oh,
this
right.
actually
No one
we,
has
we had
ever
a pretty
compared the two this much. I don't
we had a
think it's ever
we had
happened.
a pretty solid Thursday night or whatever it was with this one. We actually laughed, and we didn't talk about Doug that much. I loved the meth addict brother character. There was a lot of
Very pro Doug.
yeah.
Yeah, man, there's no limit to what this keyboard does.
Yeah, that's
Great.
There's a great throwaway joke after that scene where he's up all night playing with his stupid sampler keyboard thing, and when Amy comes in to wake John up, he complains that he kept him up all night with his keyboard noises, and then he goes, "He's got chops though." I love that joke.
Oh, God. Oh, well, and in case anyone is worried, the end credits do specify that no animal was harmed or pleasured in the making of this movie.
Ding ding.
So that already, we've watched lots of movies that have had either real or simulated animal cruelty on this podcast, and this is not
This has
one of
neither.
them. Yeah. So, all right. Well, moving off the topic then of Sleeping Dogs Lie.
Let's talk about Sleeping Dogs Lie 2.
Yeah, Electric Boogaloo. I wanted to actually, I didn't even get a chance to run this by Seth yet, but I was thinking about doing debuting a little questionnaire that's just kind of off the cuff, that of just some general questions that I could ask you, not to put you on the spot or anything.
No, I'm game.
But I thought this
Like,
would
you
be a
don't
good
have to
place.
do this. You weren't prepared.
This is a beta version.
You can leave right now.
I can't imagine any well, don't ask me about any animals I may have blown in the past. But other than that,
What's
Yeah,
the grossest thing you've
it won't
ever
get that
done?
personal. But so I'm sure a lot of your readers will know the answer to this question in particular, but just for posterity, Mike D'Angelo, what is your favorite film?
Only Angels Have Wings, 1939, directed by Howard Hawks.
All right, easy enough.
Yeah.
Was that always the case? Like, was that a first time you watched it kind of thing, or was it over the years that you realized it?
I think I knew. I saw that one, I want to say in the mid 90s originally, by which time I had seen quite a lot of films already. And I think it was a case of like, this is the greatest movie I've ever seen kind of a reaction. And then I've just kind of stuck firmly with that. I mean, your favorite movie is to some extent, I wouldn't say arbitrary. That's not right. But it's, I could substitute it with any number of other films from my like Sat and Sound list, and I wouldn't feel bad about any of those.
But there's a moment in time for you, kind of.
Yeah. For some reason, I just kind of settled on that one, and nothing has ever dislodged it so far. Although I thought Under the Skin was going to for a while. That's the one contemporary film where like halfway through it, I was like, this might be my favorite. This might be the greatest movie I've ever seen.
It's so awesome.
And then it wasn't, but, but I was feeling that way for like a solid hour. And if it had continued in the same vein for the next hour, it probably would have gotten there. But
wow, that must be a rare feeling, I would imagine, over the past several years for somebody to get that close, even for that long.
I felt that way a little. I don't think as strongly, but I was very, very excited about Tree of Life up to a point, and then I got less excited. I still really like that film, but
it does boast that. You do get that feeling with that movie. It's like, oh, but no, I don't know. I have the same thing. Yeah, where it's just like, oh man.
All right. Well, then, question number 2 is: can you think of an instance where you most significantly changed your opinion on a movie?
Which direction do you want?
Either way.
Okay. Well, I'll give you one of each.
Okay.
So I think, there are several. The most notable one in my mind, although I had another instance really very recently, which was Secret Ceremony, Joseph Losey's Secret Ceremony, which I loved the first time I saw it, gave it 80. And this time I think I went down to like 44 or something. I just did a total nosedive. And it was one of those situations where as I was watching it this time, I was like, why did I like this? I have no recollection of what impressed me about it, even though I usually like Joseph Losey. And when that happens, I worry because I saw it originally on the big screen at Lincoln Center, and this time I watched it on my TV set, and I'm like, is that the problem? Did it work on the big screen? I don't think so, but I always worry about that. That happened to me to a lesser degree with Yugetsu, the Mizoguchi film, which I used to love when I saw it on the big screen, and then the most recent time when I watched it on Blu-ray, I still liked it, but just suddenly started having dramatic issues with it. And I was like, maybe I only had dramatic issues because I'm not being overwhelmed by it, on a big screen. So anyway, the one that I was actually thinking of was not Secret Ceremony, but Leaving Las Vegas. That was a film that I adored in 1995, thought it was amazing, was on my top 10 list that year. And then I saw a bunch of other Mike Figgis movies that got worse and worse. And I started to really hate Mike Figgis. And then at some point, probably 12 or so years ago, I went back and rewatched Leaving Las Vegas, and I was like, oh, this is the same shitty movie he always makes. It just has better actors in it. That's the only difference.
That's how I felt when I saw that movie. I felt like you would have to be in 1995, but it would rip. It would rip in 1995.
It was really, I was very, at that time, Nicolas Cage was my favorite actor. He's still one of my favorite actors, but I think if you had asked me in 1995, name your favorite actor, my answer would have been without hesitation, Nicolas Cage. And had that had been the case for, I don't know, since like Moonstruck or so for a good
Fair.
8 years. Yeah. And so then this was the culmination of all of that. It was the role was born to play. I still think he's amazing in it. I'm glad he won the Oscar. But Elizabeth Shue is great in it. Everything else, it's just the filmmaking itself that I can't stand.
No,
So
yeah.
that was a huge nosedive. And then in the other direction, there are several Iranian movies that I did not care for the first time, and then went back and revisited. And I don't understand what my negative reaction was the first time. Taste of Cherry was a film that I was kind of when I saw it at New York Film Festival in '97. Now I think that film is amazing. I don't know what my problem was. And then Panahi's The Circle from 2000 is another one where I really disliked that movie at Toronto that year, and then revisited it a few years ago and was like, this is really good. I don't it's those are always disconcerting. I mean, it's why I tend to go back and rewatch things all the time, because I don't trust that I got it right the first time, or that I haven't changed enough as a person, that I'm interested in different things now and might appreciate things that I didn't appreciate before. But when it's that dramatic, I'm always like, what was wrong with me? I don't, especially because in a lot of cases, like, it's one thing if it's like, well, I saw this movie when I was 16 and I wasn't ready. Like that, I get. That's a commonplace. Everybody goes through that, I would say. But these are cases where, in a lot of cases, the first time I saw the movie, I was like, 30.
Right.
And then I come back to it years later and was like, I was old enough and my taste was already sufficiently evolved that I should have appreciated all the things that I'm appreciating now. I don't know. I find it worrisome, but at the same time, I find it kind of hopeful. So,
Sure.
Ever-changing.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. So then, and this is, I guess, maybe a little bit related. My next question is, can you think of perhaps your most unpopular opinion? Or just one of them? Because I know there's probably a lot to choose from.
No, I mean,
But,
I'm laughing because the answer to this is obvious to anyone who pays any attention to my writing on a regular basis. Like Children of Men, people hate my opinion of the long takes in Children of Men, which I am not fond of, and I have made lengthy, tortured arguments about why those shots damage the film by calling attention to their own virtuosity. Nobody agrees with me about that. That was probably the most angry comments I've ever gotten for anything I wrote for the Angry Club. And people still bring it up. It's been however many years it's been since I wrote that piece. It was probably in like 2009 or so that I wrote it. Still comes up all the time. I have not changed my mind. I continue to be somebody who, for the most part, thinks there is not usually a good reason to kill yourself trying to get something really complicated down in a single shot. Occasionally, it's interesting to me. I never want to see an entire film shot that way. Every one of those, I think, does not work. Even Russian Ark, which comes closest. But yeah, that's not a popular opinion.
Did you guys ever see the behind the scenes of how they got the long car shot? Like with the specific like camera mechanism and how all the actors had to like lay down and roll over, and it's
incredibly impressive.
It's like an acrobatic feat, but it does kind of make you wonder like how did they? What you see in the movie is just they're in a car for a really long time.
Well, but my point is when I'm watching that, I'm I don't know how they're doing it, but I'm very and maybe this is just me. I'm very conscious of the fact that what I'm seeing is not theoretically possible. Like assuming that the car were intact, the camera is going places that the camera could not possibly go. And so now I'm not involved in what's actually happening in the scene. I'm sitting there thinking, how did they accomplish this? And then I look at the behind the scenes footage and I go, oh, that's very ingenious but it pulled me right out of the movie for several sustained minutes of something that's supposed to be, building and I guess that's what it does for other people. Other people argue that when there's no cut, it feels more real to them. I have exactly the opposite reaction to that. I think the longer the take goes on showily without a cut, the more I'm thinking about everyone working behind the scenes and the less I'm thinking about the characters in the drama. So, and I think that everything that single take does could be just as easily accomplished with conventional continuity editing, which is usually, if it's done well, invisible. Like there are all kinds of cuts, but you're not even noticing them in the hands of a skilled director like a Spielberg or somebody. He's cutting all the time, but it's all done so smoothly and seamlessly that you're not even really conscious of it. That's the goal, I think.
I'm totally with you on that too. And it might be that I somehow have you in my head over the years from being familiar with all of that argument too when I see these things. But yeah, it's like in real life, we all, walk around technically with a continuous shot, but that's not how our minds actually work. Like
it's not even how your eyes work.
Oh yeah, you're right. But
that's the argument that's the part of the argument that gets people really worked up, is that I started talking about like saccades and the fact that your eyes actually jump from point to point. It's much more close to being a cut than to continuous movement. But anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even the way, like, even like a video game that has everything from a point of view shot can sometimes be kind of weird, just because even though we are these heads walking around looking at things, it doesn't feel that way. Like we're still processing things like series of images or imagining ourselves. It's I agree. Editing is what it makes movies.
Yeah, that's the heart of the art form of the medium, in my opinion. But so I hate to see people trying to remove it from the equation.
Sure. I don't know. I'm a big idiot. I like being a floating eye thing.
Okay. A lot of people do.
I just want to be God. I just want to float around. I'll let PTA do it for me. It's fine.
Yeah. All right. Well, then to bring this full circle, what would you say is your most unwatchable movie, or perhaps just a scene that comes to mind of that was actually hard to watch, in the sense of it's just something I didn't need living in my head?
Well, that was the film that we already talked about, which is Irreversible, and the rape scene in Irreversible. I think that's probably that's the thing I have to steel myself for every single time that I've watched that film. Is just like, this is going to be awful. And it always is. Like, it never gets any easier to sit through. But I think we talked about that last time. So let me see if I can come up with something other than that. So my weird, or not weird, I guess it's not that weird. I don't have a problem with gore per se. Like, you can do anything realistic. You could do it for real, actually, to a corpse on screen, and I don't care. If the body is dead, you can tear it to pieces, and it will not bother me literally at all. I don't find anything disgusting about that. What bothers me is people suffering. That's what I can't take. Scenes of prolonged torture. Audition. That's a good example. Audition is a film that I think is one of the greatest films ever made. Actually, it's 96 rating for me. Almost certainly my favorite horror film. I can't imagine there's one that's rated higher than 96. I think that film is brilliant in every way. I have not watched it in quite a few years. I'm not necessarily looking forward to watching it a fourth. I think it would be the fourth time. That one's hard for me to get through. A lot of it. Once the piano wire comes out, I don't enjoy that. Like, there's nothing. That was why on my Patreon, when people request films, at some point, not that long ago, maybe 6-9 months ago, I forget, somebody requested Cannibal Holocaust, and I was like, okay, technically that's eligible, because any film that I have not seen is automatically eligible, and I'll do it if people vote for it. But I just want you to know, this is going to be a long essay about how I don't enjoy this kind of thing at all. Like, it's just not. I'm not a gore hound, and I have no moral objection to people who are. I understand on some theoretical level the appeal, but I do not enjoy watching people physically, or even really emotionally to some extent, but definitely not physical suffering. It's very hard for me to take. So I always have to kind of grit my teeth. And also, obviously, you were just mentioning actual animal suffering. Like, that's probably the worst example is Wake and Fright. Have you guys done Wake and Fright?
Oh my God. No, we
No.
haven't, but I know the scene you're talking about is unbearable.
Yeah, that was that. I mean, I forced myself to sit through all of it because I'm anal retentive. If I were the kind of person who was willing to say, I'm just going to skip past this and go to the next scene, I would have done that. Like, I really did not want to sit through it. Unfortunately, I have the kind of brain where I'm just like, nope, I must watch the entire movie or I can't log it. So I forced myself to sit through the entire fucking carnage. But I would probably choose not to watch that again. Even if I were to watch the film again, I think I would skip past that part.
So Mike's a freak. He doesn't enjoy suffering. He doesn't enjoy like suffering.
Yeah, I'm amused in hindsight that I tried to characterize that as being weird.
But in the world of movies, it's weird. That's the thing.
Real
Weird
weirdo.
movies, it's yeah.
Can you not even? Are you not even allowed to kind of avert your eyes for a second? Do you make yourself watch every like kangaroo getting?
No. In fact,
nailed down?
Here's a funny story for you. It has nothing to do with violence or suffering or anything like that. But the last time that I used the bathroom in the middle of a film was Heathers during the original theatrical release of Heathers, which I believe was in 1990. The film is from '89, but I think it came out where I lived in 1990. And this is true. I had to pee so bad that I would have wet my pants if I did not get up. I have not had that experience since, but I tried to ignore it for like 40 minutes. And eventually I was like, I'm going to wet my pants if I don't get up and go to the bathroom. It was midway through the movie. I got up, I went to the bathroom, took a leak, and I went home. I did not go back into the movie. I went home, and then I calculated what time that was. The next day, I went back to the same theater, the same screening. I went to the ticket person and said, listen, I was here yesterday. Here's my ticket stub. I had to get up and leave in the middle of the movie. I didn't tell her why. I need to go back in and watch the movie. So I went back in from slightly before the point where I had left and watched the rest of it the next day. But I would not go to the bathroom and then come back and continue the film.
That's amazing.
See, now that's the kind of thing where you would need to assure people you're not a psychopath.
Yes, that actually, I would not do that today. Today, I would just go, if I actually had to pee that badly, I would go in and watch the rest of the movie. And then at some point down the road, I would go watch the part that I missed. But at the time, I was that dogmatic about it that I was just like, I can't continue if I haven't seen the last 3 minutes. So.
All right. Well, I'm so glad that you've gotten to the point where you can do that. It must be a little more calming.
Yes.
For yourself. All right. Well, then my last question is a very simple one, and it is Southland Tales, good or bad?
Oh, come on.
Bad. Terra bad. Now, I have not seen Southland Tales since I saw it at Cannes on its world premiere. That was the last time. I have not gone near it since. I think I might have watched the music video scene on its own at one point just to see if I liked that. You know what? That made the Scandies. It was one of the Scandies' best scene choices, so I watched it then. But other than that, I hated that film so much that I have never had the slightest desire to go back and see, even though I know that the cut I saw is not the cut that got released. Like, he changed it after Cannes. I'm pretty sure significantly. And yet, based on what I saw, I'm like, there's no salvaging this movie. There's no way he could turn this into something I would enjoy. It would just be a different version of torture for me. Now, at some point, somebody actually did briefly suggest it for Patreon. And then I pointed out to him that I had reviewed it from Cannes, and he was like, that's good enough. So he withdrew it. But somebody may ask me to watch it again, and I opened that up to people. I said, if enough time has passed, if it's been more than 10 years, then even if I've reviewed it previously and given it a rating, I'll give it another chance if you want me to. So somebody could request it and force me to try it again, and maybe I would get something more out of it. But man, did I not like that movie at all.
We had
at all.
I'm not gonna say anything. I think people that like it, we should not talk about it. I think that's what I've learned over the years. There's no point. It's like, it's like Republicans and Democrats. There's no point.
We had Nathan Rabin on, to talk about that one, and Seth and Nathan were very pro
We were
Southland Tales.
rolling down the
it was
hill,
the
giggling,
It was a love
having
fest.
a good time.
it was the
Oh.
most embattled Mark has ever been on the podcast so far. So
He was like, surely this professional critic is not down. Surely Seth will be put in his place.
I have nothing against anybody who thinks that film is awesome. I can understand
It's
in
nice
theory
of you.
why somebody would enjoy it. I just found it so deeply unfunny. It's just like whatever his sense of humor and mine, there's like the Venn diagram is two circles somehow. I don't know.
Oh, he's not very funny. No.
Yeah. So
I'll give you that.
if you love Southland Tales, it's not because you're finding it hilarious then.
No.
Oh,
No.
okay. Well, that's a relief. Because my sense was that it was trying to be funny and failing
It
miserably.
tries.
Oh,
It
that was
definitely
my
tries.
sense.
It tries to do all sorts of things that it doesn't quite do.
Okay.
So you just have to
Again,
like things not working.
Which
I'm
there
trying not
is
to-
an audience for that.
I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this.
I know, sorry. This was I sprung this on Seth. This is my revenge for having to
do
sit
it.
through the whole
I do it.
episode.
And just wait. One of the many episodes where Mark has to just wait after someone is being like, "This is one of my favorite movies of all time," and then Mark is just having to be like, "All right, when do I say that this is one of my least favorite movies of all time?"
New rule: you cannot call in reinforcements when you're in the minority on a film.
I could have done the same with Harmony Korine because that episode was another person whose films changed their life, and it was very beautiful to hear about.
Right now.
I mean, I'm not generally a fan of his, but he has made films that I don't despise, so that's something. Like I don't hate Julian Donkey Boy. There were elements of that I did like. Trash Humpers is a film that I hate even more than Southland Tales.
Everybody hates that here. We can all agree on that.
Okay.
We can all have a good time agreeing on that one. No
You,
trash humping.
I swear I'll wrap this up soon, but you weren't you in a class of some kind with Harmony Korine at one point at NYU?
Yeah, he and I were we had the same freshman year. I forget what it was called. It was basically when you when you start at the dramatic writing program, you're taking a basic like intro to dramatic writing class, and he was in my class. I didn't know him. Like we had a nodding acquaintance, but we didn't like hang out or anything. And he was not there very long. Like he dropped out after the first year to make kids because he got discovered by Larry Clark in the park right near NYU, and so then. But he knows who I am. Like we know each other by sight. So like at one point I went into Kim's video in New York and he happened to be there. And he was actually the one who said, I was looking for something to rent. And he was like, you should get this film, Les Amants du Pont Neuf, which I had not heard of at that point. So he was the one who turned me on to that film and Leos Carax. And that was great. And he was also at I had an internship at Fine Line Features in 95, I think it was. Yeah, 95. And so I was, as part of that, I was at the premiere of Basketball Diaries. And because I knew him, I ended up talking to him and DiCaprio and Jim Carroll for like an hour about, I don't even remember anymore. It's weird. You would think I would remember the substance of that conversation.
What the fuck were you talking about?
I don't think I was doing a lot of talking, but you would think I would better remember what they were talking about, and I really don't. I just remember being not even that awesome. Like this is before Titanic, so I knew who DiCaprio was. He had already been Oscar nominated by that point for What's Eating Gilbert Grape, but he was not Leo like he would become like 2 years later. So it was still
hottie.
Yeah. It's really weird. The other thing that I remember from, it wasn't that premiere, it was a different premiere. I think it was for a film called Frankie Starlight. But that was also in 95. I was at the premiere party for that one. And my most vivid memory of that party was Cameron Diaz was there. This was 1 year after she did The Mask. So she was already famous, but she was not really that famous yet. And she was standing around that party by herself the whole time. Like nobody was talking to her. Nobody was paying the slightest attention to her. She looked really kind of lonely and bored. I remember thinking like, that's that girl from The Mask. And she looks like she would rather be anywhere else and nobody gives a shit. It's really strange.
Your whole life could have changed if you had gone up and talked to her. This could be You wouldn't be anywhere near this
Literally.
podcast right now.
I wish Mike would come up and talk to me.
Never occurred to me to do so. But yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, so I know Harmony slightly, but I don't hate Harmony or anything. He was a perfectly nice guy to the little extent that I've had interactions with him. He just happens to make films that I don't generally enjoy very much.
Well, maybe that conversation that you don't remember, like, was where the idea for Trash Humpers came from, and that's what you guys were discussing.
Yeah, you just started talking, and
that's where he
Harmony
broke
was
the story.
nodding, and you were talking about this trash and humping it.
Yeah.
Well,
he got the idea from Leo.
Yeah,
Probably. Yeah.
he might be in that movie under one of the masks. Who knows?
We'll
It's
never know
entirely
who it
possible.
is.
Yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being generous with your time and for bringing this movie to our attention for
No
mostly better. And yeah, is there anything you wanted to, throw out there to listeners or just say about your Patreon, which again is, I think you've definitely got a bang for your buck now, especially now that's been going on for so many years. I mean, it's just endless reviews you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, well, in theory, you were supposed to be able to get them on Letterboxd eventually. Originally, my plan, and I did it for a while. I would write it on Patreon, and then a month later, I would port it over to Letterboxd. So if you didn't want to subscribe, you only had to wait a month. But I quickly discovered that it was very boring to do that, and so I don't do it very frequently. So now I'm about 2 years behind. So I think the most recent things that I've written directly on Letterboxd are from like 2021. So really, most of my writing you would have to subscribe at this point. I did recently hit an exciting milestone, which is that I now have I think I'm back up. It dipped below again, and I think it's back up over 1,000 total patrons, which is way more than I ever imagined I would be able to get people to. It's very hard to get people to pay even a tiny amount of money for internet writing, which is supposed to be free in everyone's mind. So the fact that I have managed to persuade 1,000 people to allow me to continue doing this is amazing, and I am eternally grateful to all of them, including you guys, or at least one of you. And so, yeah, I would encourage people, if you know my writing and you enjoy it, then it's only $1. I will always keep the reviews at $1 a month. There's other tiers that you can do other things, but if you just want to read what I write, it's only $1 a month. That's so little that you literally won't even notice that it's taken out of your account. And it allows me to do this because literally I would have to go get some kind of actual job and I would no longer have time to write anything. So that's the only thing that makes it possible.
All right. Yeah. Let's keep Mike out of the labor market so we can keep all enjoying
No more Pizza Hut.
with this. Yeah.
Especially because I am now old enough that I am unlikely to find employment even at a McJob at this point. Like I don't know what I would do. Like if I actually had to go find a job, I've got to go out there with a resume that says I've just been a freelance writer for literally the last 26 years. There's nobody they can call. Like I have no references of any kind. I've kind of fucked myself, honestly.
Right.
You just show them that you've been that you've been spending your time slightly increasing and then decreasing your rating of a movie about blowing a dog.
And they'll be like, I can relate.
Yes.
You got a good head on your shoulders. I'm going to take a chance on you.
I don't know. I'm very worried about my old age and how that's going to work out. I'm probably not going to inherit a lot of money, although my parents are doing okay. But I also have 6 to 8 siblings, depending on which parents you're talking about. So it's going to be divvied up a lot of ways, and I can't count on that.
Rough break. Yeah.
At some point, I'm going to have to figure out. Although I got to say, I did not think the Patreon was going to last as long as it has. So the fact that it's still growing after 5 years, maybe I'm not in as bad shape as I thought I was. But anyway, so that's all the plugging that I'm going to do.
I mean,
You might have to trying, Mike.
You might have to expand the Patreon into podcasting at some point. You might have to get down here and into the bottom feeding world of podcasting with the rest of us.
Please. There are people out there who are trying to convince me that I should be doing this on YouTube instead, as YouTube videos. And yes, that is how you would make a lot of money, and I would do that if I were 24. but I don't feel like anybody wants to watch like a 55-year-old man on YouTube talking about movies. I do not think there is a market for that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
See, I specifically, every once in a while, I'll find an old guy, and I will love it. Because actually, what irks me the most is feeling like there's this young guy who, like, is just, I don't know, he's just trying to move through the ranks or whatever it is and just get followers or whatever, which, like,
the funny thing is,
an older person, more experienced, doesn't have that feeling. I think I would appreciate it.
Let me amend that. I would do it if I were 24, and I would also do it if I were 74. I think if I were older than I am, there would be a market for that. Old guy reviews movies. It's being in the middle that I think is not good. But that's just a sense that I have. It might be wrong.
All right. Well, in 20 years, look out for Mike's YouTube channel.
It's entirely possible. I wouldn't rule it out.
Unwatchables is produced by Tony Scarpitti, hosted by me, Marc Dottavio, and Seth Troyer, with artwork by Micah Kraus. You can find Seth and I on Letterboxd under Marc Dottavio and Sloth Troyer. You can also check us out at unwatchableспod.com for links to our Twitter and Instagram, or support us on Patreon for bonus content and to have a say in what we watch. Thanks for listening.